So, hello everybody, and welcome to the first installment of ClueCon Weekly, hosted by yours truly, Luca Pradovera. And this is going to be fun, and I'm very happy to take over David's work, and it's going to be very interesting for me. Our first guest for today is going to be McGee, our CTO at SignalWire, who helped us build a lot of what you're using every day, and is going to walk us through about a few of the new things that are going on in SignalWire, and maybe we'll take a look at what's going on behind the scenes with all the machines we're running, all the things that are happening here, and making sure we have a good view of what really our technology is and why it's so disruptive for the industry. So, Evan, take it off.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, welcome. And Luca, I am so excited to see you here. I think this is a perfect place for you to be. I think everyone's going to love hearing from you, both from your technical knowledge and also from the fact that you're just so damn personable. I think it's just so great. And yeah, no, I'm thrilled to be here. Thrilled to talk to everybody about it. We have lots coming up. SignalWire is working pretty hard behind the scenes to do some pretty amazing things, right? One of the reasons we started the company was trying to innovate in this space, in the space of communications online. And I feel like we are hitting a stride in that, particularly with like these products we're using right now to record this, SignalWire Work and SignalWire Events, right? Building very elastic sort of global communications platforms. This is particularly one as like a work office replacement, right? And one of the things that we found, it's interesting, Luca, you go back to like the beginning of the pandemic, right? Go back to like the start of COVID. We had a very like basic version of this that we used for just SignalWire internal purposes, kind of like our own, like the way Slack started is that the gaming company has like their own texting thing, right? We use this to work, across the world. You're in Italy, I'm in Los Angeles. Like, it's like we had to find a way to collaborate together. And we also wanted to have a place where we could have corporate culture, things like that. Actually have people like pop in and pop out and not just have like one-off meetings. And so that's where, Cantina, which is the original name for this product, came from. And when the pandemic hit, if you remember, like we were like, hey, like this is something that I think everyone's going to need, because really COVID has pushed forward the idea of virtual work, 5 to 10 years in a lot of industries. And one of the things that's falling behind is simply the idea that you miss those like water cooler chats, you want to pop in, hallway stalk people. How do you find somebody? And with SignalWire Work, you can actually do that based on the fact that we have all of these, people are online. You can see everybody online in all the rooms all at the same time. So really just try, like, that's the kind of innovation we're talking about, where it's not just one-off meetings anymore. It's like we're living our digital lives online in a new way that's never been really approximated. And it's so across so many verticals. So it's exciting. I think that what we're trying to do to try to help solve those problems, keep people connected, keep work moving. SignalWire, one of the mottos is, just work. And we want it to just work for you, so you can just get your work done. And hope it's resonating with some people, which we've seen that it is.
Yeah, I can speak to by experience saying it's been a great experience so far. It really, really reduces the distance between a distributed team, especially at the time where we can't even meet each other. I used to travel a lot, I'll be honest. I used to go to the US all the time, go see people. I like meeting people, and I see the value of face-to-face time. But as things have changed and many things are different now, work has essentially reduced that friction to zero internally within the company. So that is really something that's been going. Oh well, kids.
Yeah, well, see, I know, right? It's also children. That's virtual school, right? He just finished his virtual school project for the morning, so it's all good.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Great. So I think it's been a great experience so far, and this is just the first iteration, right? It's so what's coming down the pipeline with SignalWire Work and the video stuff in general?
Well, we have a lot kind of coming up in this front, right? So we're pushing forward on both like the ways that this can be incredibly low latency and incredibly located. So the fact that, let's say we do have teams, let's say you are in an office, right? And you have teams scattered around the world, much like we do. So you have Central European time, you might have Beijing Standard Time, you might have like West Coast Mountain Time, anywhere in the world. And you need those teams to be able to collaborate in the most efficient way possible. Well, the people who are in like CET might like have their own like meeting rooms and stuff like that. You don't want to have their audio and video going all the way back to the US or Canada, then back all the way to Europe again. Like that just doesn't make for a very good experience. So the idea of like intelligent call routing, having conferences and meeting rooms that actually like exist anywhere in the world at any time, and then can kind of balloon up and balloon down and scale, and then can actually move around. So as people join them, can optimally choose the best place on earth that they should be. So if you have 5 users join from the West Coast of the US, Maybe everything goes to Frankfurt, right? So everyone's located in CET, or maybe like that gets rehomed transparently over to New York because there's just better path routing to everybody. So intelligent path routing in that regard, making it just like this as good of an experience as it can possibly be, utilizing the public internet, the public clouds, right? I think you talked to a lot of old, you know this, being an old school telecom guy. Talk to those guys, and they're like, you just need dedicated links, you need MPLS, you need that kind of stuff, and they're not wrong. If you want that, that's amazing. It's also extremely expensive. Makes the cost of these products go through the roof, right? And also kind of limits you to where you can go. You can't really deploy it that quickly. So we're really trying to pioneer this on public cloud, sort of edge computing, so we can put these things at the base of 5G towers, stuff like that. Partnering with a lot of very interesting companies to fulfill some very specific kind of use cases that I think are pretty fascinating.
Nice. So is there going to be a video API coming down the line?
Yes. Yeah. So right now we have sort of a JavaScript browser-based SDK you can kind of get in there and mess around with some stuff. That's being rapidly expanded. There are server-side ones as well. You can do like call, command, and control. Those are also getting a lot of love. And then we have naturally our Compatibility API, which is an XML-based one, kind of based on the TWIML format, which allows you to bring over sort of any existing TWIML-based application and kind of run it on SignalWire just off the bat. So lots of ways to get started, right? Everything from video to just, typical audio call routing and everything in between. SMS, of course.
And anybody wanting to get started, just drop me an email and I'll be happy to help you.
Please drop Luca all the emails you possibly can.
That's sad. So let's go back to the worldwide distribution network that SignalWire is building, and in general, the amount of resources required, etc. So how do you manage such a large system with ease?
Yeah, so you need to leverage quite a few things. A lot of open source tooling, a lot of sort of best practices for DevOps and remote scaling. So, the core of it is some sort of orchestration framework. Well, I guess the core of it is the idea that really making sure that all of your applications are containerized, right? So for us, you could do this with VMs as well. You lose some of the flexibility in how you deploy things and what you do if you try to do it that way. But we have chosen that all applications inside SignalWire just be in containers, right? So everything's containerized. Once you've done that, then you can choose an orchestration framework, something like Kubernetes or Docker Swarm, and take those to then scale out across multiple public data centers, right? So effectively creating sort of a meta cloud on top of the public cloud. From there, right, that's the easiest way to get started. You get started with that. I mean, you can do single node Kubernetes clusters or Swarm clusters, then you scale them out. From there, you have issues where as you grow and want to move across the planet, you want to do, regionalized data. So suddenly you start to have like multiple different versions of the same thing. So suddenly it's not just one global cluster, you need multiple regional ones. And, it also helps with some of the service mesh routing, right? So one of the things the orchestration network gets you also is the idea that you don't have to think too much about necessarily like how you're deploying, right? It kind of abstracts away a lot of that underlying complexity and takes it away. So that's very
Yeah, we all have kids. Only mine are more grown up, and just fight each other while yours are still interactive.
Oh yeah, mine's asking if you can. Mine's asking if you can read his books on his epic reading program. I was like, of course you can. Read whatever books you want. But yeah, so that's sort of how we're doing all of that, right? And that's kind of the high level of a lot of it. Any specific questions about some of that? Yeah.
Yeah, so as everybody knows, SignalWire manages the FreeSwitch open source project, and we got a lot of questions about how we run FreeSwitch internally, etc. And while I know not all of it can be disclosed, it would be really interesting to hear some of the high-level vision of how to containerize FreeSwitch, because that sounds like it's always a problem for people. And I get a lot of questions about, I'm trying to run FreeSwitch in Docker, and this happens. I'm trying to run FreeSwitch in Docker, and this other thing happens. And it's generally a complex area. So in the spirit of, helping people out and putting them on the right path.
I always recommend people run it. People ask in the channels or anyone comes into the community Slack, right? They say, is FreeSwitch made to be containerized? And the answer is sure. It's an application. Anything can be containerized, right? It's not a limitation of the software. It's just a limitation of how you want to deploy it. And there are some gotchas, right? So like any media stack, FreeSwitch needs a huge range of ports. That's the number one thing people run into is the ports issue, right? So the ports issue is a problem because the way that currently the Docker works, and this is different across other frameworks, but the way that currently Docker works is that it assigns like a userland proxy to every port effectively. And the way that kind of means is that every IP tables rule for every port is kind of added independently. It's a huge memory overhead. Things time out. It's really horrible. And so you can't do 10,000 range openings. Docker does not currently have like a range mechanism for its IP table sort of rule injection. You have to do it one by one. So you have to get around that. And the way to get around that is basically you have to open up the ports manually, right? You say, oh, okay, you can do it one of two ways, right? You can say, basically, I want to run FreeSwitch in host mode, which exposes the host's networking stack, right? And that's fine. That just gives you basically a containerized FreeSwitch with the entire like host running. And then you just have all the ports open you want and your charger taking care of that. Or you can basically, do some IP tables wrangling yourself where you just manually inject the IP tables port rules in there, and then it just forwards the correct things, And usually that's done with another little Docker sidecar. You run a little sidecar next to it that just does the IP tables updates. It runs along with the FreeSwitch containers and just kind of takes care of them for you. You'll see this kind of sidecar pattern happening a lot with these orchestration frameworks. We need to do something that's a little bit weird, or it might be something you would normally run with like a cron task, or just like whatever else. You just kind of have a container that lives and just does stuff off to the side. Maybe it checks IP tables rules. Maybe it uploads crashed core files to S3. Who knows? All kinds of these things. And because
certificates too.
Certificate updating. I mean, certificates are a big one. That has its own whole like scaling thing, right? If you're using LE to like redo certificates, but you need to like get these things everywhere. How do you automate all of that? Like, how do you start getting the cert that you're renewing one place into everywhere reliably? We use HashiCorp's Vault for a lot of that. I would recommend Vault for a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Start using these tools that are out there. And if I could give one piece of advice for the entire underlying thing, is I feel like a lot of the concern with containerizing FreeSwitch or other applications is the fact that people expect the state on the box to always be there or to go between. They get concerned when shared volumes, right? Here's a good example: shared disk, right? Like I'm saving recordings or I'm saving something. If this box crashes, how do I get them? And the answer is really the true answer is you should never be saving anything locally for longer than is absolutely necessary. Absolutely every piece of information that you need, whether it's CDRs or log files or anything else, should be popped off that little guy as fast as you possibly can and put somewhere more durable. Logging should be dumped into Elasticsearch or Graylog or wherever you want to put it, right? The CDR should be transmitted somewhere else. You should really not rely on the containers or the underlying host to exist for any period of time. It does mean that you need to build in, caching for things and some other slightly, think about that a little bit as you go forward. You can do distributed file systems like Ceph or something like that. Or, I know one of the new upcoming actual Dockers is going to have shared volume mounts. Kubernetes has them. So you can kind of get around it. But if you start relying on that, you're going to start hitting edge cases where you're trying to grow and it doesn't work. So I would say very, very, one of the main points that you're building is truly decouple any kind of local storage from the application running itself. Only store locally what is absolutely necessary. And if that box disappears, it shouldn't be a problem to turn on another one and just be able to pull everything down and just bootstrap itself and off it goes.
And I will second using Ceph, really. It's a great choice. Also allows you to pick a few ways to communicate with it, including the S3 compatible interface. You can just ship things to your cluster, or you can do more complicated mounts and it still works. And I think you're striking the right chord here. It feels like much of the industry is rightfully coming from an era where you will buy 5 PBXs. They will come in an actual box. You'd carry them to your office, put them in your rack, wire them up, fire it up, hit the HTTP 168.0.0.0 IP and just go and 0.0.1 IP and just configure it. And that's something people still expect to be doing. There's people who have been running the same PBX for 20 years. And switching to a paradigm where your FreeSwitch servers go down overnight on purpose because you don't want them to be there is giving people a lot of anxiety, really. Like, what if it doesn't come back tomorrow?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty big paradigm shift, but it's actually something that's really needed in the industry. Like, people
Oh
need to
yeah.
start going that way. It's I think telephony is weird because we've been behind on some of those concepts for a while.
Yeah. Well, I
The
mean, it's
web
slow,
server,
right?
yeah, the
Like
web server
something's
industry has
slow.
been doing that for 20 years, so probably the concept of
Yeah.
just spinning up stuff.
Well, I mean, I think that part of it is that like there wasn't really an aspect you could get into it that quickly, right? I mean, FreeSwitch was invented because the VoIP hardware at the time was so expensive, and like Anthony wanted to kind of commoditize that and take this $1 million of Acme packet machines and put them onto commodity hardware. That kicked off sort of VoIP, but then telecom really relies on like end-to-end connectivity. You need to have something that's compatible with what I have, and the guys at the top have no incentive to change, right? We're still using POTS technologies from the 1930s. So like, there's no reason for them to change. The only the biggest shift was wireless, and they had to maintain compatibility with the POT stuff, which is why the call quality of your cell phone sucks.
This Ericsson washing machine size equipment that still powers like 80% of the world's
It's very expensive. It's expensive. It's hard to remove. I mean, they finalized the IMS stuff, which is kind of the core of the modern like 4G LTE networks. I guess 5G. They finished rolling that out. But IMS was finalized in like '98. They didn't really get it deployed to like the mid 20-teens. Like, you're talking 15, 20-year deployment timelines for tech that is really something that we would roll out in probably a matter of 6 months to a year. So it's just a different life cycle. Now they are catching up slowly, right? A lot of this is also ripping out all those base stations, replacing the base stations with like actual real computers and not just like, just like printed circuit boards. So that's cool that we now have so much more computing capabilities, which is actually great for SignalWire and everybody who wants to do edge computing, because you're now talking about having actual real like mini data centers at the base of all of these towers. So that's pretty awesome. So for the idea of like, what could you put on there? Why send anything over the public internet if you could have, SignalWire's case, if you could have like a work instance on my tower and a work instance on the tower over here, why not have them directly talk to each other and just bypass everything else? For gaming, for anything that's kind of very latency sensitive. I think it's really going to be pretty powerful going forward. At least now we're getting to that era. Yeah, and we'll be there.
So, well, I think this was a very good conversation. Thank you so much for being our first guest on this new installment of ClueCon Weekly. And I mean, if there's anything else you listeners would like to ask, if there's any questions you have, drop me a line. I'll be happy to forward them to Evan. Likewise, if you want to get started on SignalWire, there's plenty of guides around. There's plenty of materials, and anything you need, just let us know. Other than that, thank you very much, Evan, for being with us. Evan McGee, the CTO of SignalWire, and this was ClueCon Weekly for this week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luca.